I can see a whole bunch of stars behind the space, beyond the galaxy and universe and planets, all as constellations in mind. That way, it will lead us to something completely revolutionary. Hey, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? I'm Duffy Duck here once again, and I'm back for some more of the Mecheye Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to more Let's Play of Kirby Superstar, aka Kirby's Fun Pack, aka, those who lived in Japan, Kirby of the Stars Super Deluxe. Now, I think I've got that right this time, because after all, during the likes of a couple of parts ago, I've always get confused what the actual Japanese title of this game is called, but I've now finally recognized this, even though that makes it more of a count. So, anyways, for the Super Nintendo / Super Famicom for Japan. So, last time we actually explored for those 3 worlds, in this case 3 stages actually, but in forms of Floria and Aquilus, and also Sky High. And also in addition to that though, we've managed to obtain 10 copy abilities in total. And today for this episode is the fact that we're moving on into the 4th level in this particular Milky Way Wishes. As far as I haven't mentioned about this before, that we're still going to be continuing on with the forms of the Milky Way Wishes, because even then, we're going to be exploring through Hotbeat, which is essentially a lava-themed level, just like how it does it in your forms of... I was classified for Volcano Valley from Sonic the Hedgehog. No, not Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic 3D Blast kind of vibe. Except the fact that it's in the Kirby game instead of like, just a, Sonic game after all. So, Hotbeat is kind of annoying to deal with because all you have to do is basically we need to come across into... You son of a... Ah, there goes the first step on Milky Way Wishes, which... To be honest, I'm also able to keep that in the video as it is, so yeah, that kind of sucks. Anyway though, but even though still, regardless of anything else for this recitable, that hopefully we can get ourselves more extra lives later on, so even though that we would able to actually get ourselves comfortable experience all in all. So, anyway, for Lava Beat, it's kind of annoying because all you have to do is basically we need to avoid as many lava stuff as possible because it is the lava thing that's going to be your biggest pain in the bum sometimes, because even then though, if you remember from the forms of how the fact that in the Great Cave Offensive and Revenge of Meta Knight, that normally we've already come across into those lava stuff, we've already noticed that. Except the fact that it makes it a tad bit more dangerous than last time, because we had to deal with this a lot in Heartbeat itself. And of course, we need to use our Wing Copy ability, and in addition to the Invincibility Lollipop, so that way we can actually bypass for this part right there until we have obtained the Fire Copy ability. So even though that way I can actually keep that for a long period of time. So, how about that then? So today was actually forms of, I was classified, today was the 22nd of March, 2018, so, not much to tell, besides, recently they recently revealed their gameplay footage of the forms of Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition on Nintendo Switch. And as far as I just realized, whenever I, watched the gameplay footage on that particular version of Hyrule Warriors, I can definitely tell right from the get-go is the fact that I think they pretty much fixed almost everything, unlike how it does it in the Wii U, the 3DS versions, and, they managed to improve upon the Switch versions that... I believe first off, they've now actually supported, I'm assuming, 1080p first off. In addition to that though, I'm assuming that that version will actually have a feature that you can actually switch between, different characters every time when you're entering the free play, or in this case, Legends mode. And, although I may be wrong about that, but I haven't really, looked upon a Let's Play on that game for quite some time now. For almost in 2 years, because it's kind of odd to actually release Hyrule Warriors in the, 2 years beyond, which even then though, that first off, the Wii U version of Hyrule Warriors did first release in 2014, and then the 3DS version came out, which is Hyrule Warriors Legends, came out on 2016, and then in 2 years time, by the forms of 2018, Nintendo Switch version of Hyrule Warriors will be on its way, and doing the likes of, in the rest of the world in the English version. So even then, that's a little bit odd for when it comes to pattern design choices. Kind of like how it does it in the release of the original Crash Bandicoot games on the PlayStation department. And same applies for Spyro the Dragon and stuff like that. Excuse me about that, sorry about that. It's because the reason why I haven't really talked too much is because my throat is once again still dried up as it is because I've recently managed to eat myself pizza, which at the moment my favorite pizza will have to be American type, and even then and also dough balls as well, which even then I was really very curious of how the fact that my dear girlfriend Twilight Sparkle did recently manage to fetch me those, which even then that I was really appreciated with her. So anyways though, you know, today was actually forms of the 22nd of March, though, obviously. So even then, we've already got, sorry about that. I really do apologize for that, folks. We already got tomorrow by the forms of, Detective Pikachu on the 3DS will be releasing tomorrow and everywhere else for this time of day. Even especially noticeable in the 3DS's life, which I'm really pumped about it, but, excuse me about that, I would appreciate it if I want to get that game, but obviously, you know, as I mentioned about this during a couple of times, it's worth noting for that thanks to Nintendo Direct 8th of March special is the fact that the 3DS never stops. But even then, I was really expecting if Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey will be definition of my final 3DS game I'm about to be getting. But we don't know exactly when though, because again, 3DS never seemed to end, first off. But even then, I think this is more likely something to do with the selling point of the new Nintendo 2DS XL, with some kids usually enjoys playing with. So this scene is completely autopilot here and there as well, so just in case, except for those little excuse me about that, I really start to apologize for that point, folks, because you know, I kept on coughing a lot, and then even then, sometimes I've almost choked myself, so even now I do apologize. So anyways, here's the next boss in the forms of, you know, Milky Way Wishes, which is the exact same fighters that we've already come across into ever since the Great Cave Offensive, and that was actually, Leo Chameleon, which even then, behaves exactly like how it does it from last time, so even then, there's one ability I would love to show you a case off from this, and that was the forms of paint. Basically kind of like how it does it in Cook Kirby, and especially with Mike Kirby, it does like a one usage only, which even then except unlike how it does it in the forms of Cook, which allows enemies turn into food, and Mike is pretty much just screen nuke. You can actually use that 3 times. And, oh yeah, I forgot about Crash, actually, because in Crash, it does the exact same thing as Mike, except you have to use that ability at least once. And, also, during about the fact that the paint is actually quite unique, is the fact that if you manage to use paint on, specifically on boss battles most likely, it will actually change their color variations or the other color variations of the bosses themselves, which I think is actually really cool. By the looks of how the fact that take that Chameleon boss fight, for example. Normally you start things off with the actual fight that normally it just has like a random colored Chameleon, but even then though, in this particular, if you manage to get into that particular paint copy ability, for instance, then you would able to actually just realize that you would able to actually change this color formation, which I think is actually really cool. I'm gonna have to say that much until now. So, anyways though, enough about this little copy abilities for the meantime, but even then, oh yeah, by the way, for some of these, worlds throughout in this particular Milky Way Wishes, sometimes they actually brings us, 3 copy abilities, while other times though, in other worlds we're gonna be hitting to later on, specifically ones we've already done, budgetary forms of Heatbeat or Hotbeat, sometimes they contains, 2 copy abilities to find, so even then though, that makes it pretty obvious. So we've got ourselves, I was classified for 7 more copy abilities left, so even then though, that we've pretty much almost got into the full house of the forms of copy ability storage. So, the next copy ability is the fact that we need to deal out with this little, Poopy Brothers Jr. until you're able to get yourselves bomb. Sorry about that, folks, I just had to, like, stop on and keep on, like, belching or coughing all the time because I ate so much pizza. I think that's the only problem I have with it, though. Sure, it still is a bit unhealthy, but even then, I kind of prefer salad over a bit more still. But I digress. The next copy ability we need to get is, after doing out with Bonkers right there, with a different color variation this time. And then when you deal out with Bonkers, then you get yourselves a hammer. But that doesn't stop there, because as far as I expected this, you know, to mention this earlier ago, there's actually a last copy ability in this room, which even if for this level anyway. Oh, by the way, the level is actually called Cavios, which is basically a cavern-based level, in this case a cave level. Because as you expected, the majority of the actual level itself is just the fact that we need to actually keep on exploring the actual cave itself. So that makes it pretty obvious with that one point. So we got to deal with this particular buckley right there before we're able to actually get ourselves some progression. So even though everything else checks out for this point right there, so let's enter this next door. And yeah, we pretty much at the halfway point in the forms of Milky Way Wishes, actually, because if you're expecting that this game will actually be a lot longer compared to how it does it in the Great Cave Offensive, actually, I'm much well able to disagree on this, because even then, though, unlike the ones in the Great Cave Offensive, that normally, it might be shorter if you manage to become a casual player, if you don't be bothered to actually grab every single treasures. But the reason why the Great Cave Offensive was actually the longest games of the bunch, just because if you want to get 100% completion in the forms of that particular moment, when you grab all the treasure chests in mine, when you usually kind of have to grab like all 60 of these treasures, for instance, then it might actually take you a lot of exploration you're gonna have to deal with, though. So, but at least in Milky Way Wishes, though, is the fact that most of these levels, expecting if you want to able to find every single copy abilities as possible, you'll be expecting to actually finish that entirety of Milky Way Wishes until a couple of minutes or so. So anyways, here's our Wham Bam Rock makes a return, but in forms of, you know, the Great Cave Offensive as the forms of the final boss on that particular mode, as far as I established that earlier ago. And as far as I've noticed something right from the start, though, is the fact that I can assume that most of the boss's attack pattern is a little bit more different this time. But even then, it just makes it incredibly fast and reflexes and all that stuff. I don't know why do I exactly explain that, but I digress. So yeah, aside from Detective Pikachu will be on its way on the 3DS tomorrow, in the 23rd of March, during in 2 days' time, for those of you who become a brony still, or in this case a My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fan like I still do, Season 8 will be on its way until 2 days' time. It might be a perfect time to able to actually watch that particular season until after I manage to recently finish up with this particular Let's Play, because even though we haven't got that long though, because even though we've almost gone towards the end of the forms of Milky Way Wishes. And after that, then I'm probably not going to tell you just yet until the next video, or in this case especially at the very end of the Milky Way Wishes. So even though, there he goes, Wham Bam Rock. So that concludes that level, and I believe we're going to be moving on to the 6th level of the forms of Milky Way Wishes, but even then though, that's 5 stars granted. So the next level we're about to be heading to right about now is the forms of this level right here. Excuse me about that, folks. I really start to, apologizing for the fact that I keep on doing that, because, you know, this is going to be the majority of this particular Let's Play for this point, folks, or this part of the Let's Play, I should say. Anyways, this level is called, Mecheye, which appears to be almost identical to the Revenge of Mennonite's Hellbird, level, because it borrows the exact same music, and especially the actual environment, except a noticeable difference this time around, though, is the fact that we don't have to deal with the time limit system. In addition to that, though, the color textures, especially with the color palettes on the forms of the metallical platforms themselves, are extremely different this time, but in forms of just brown and sometimes an occasional gray in the next room that we've actually entered. So anyways, though, much like how it does it in the forms of Hotbeat, there are only 2 copy abilities in this particular level, along with the 7th level. But even then, we'll get to that eventually, because if we actually approach into this door here, we get ourselves the Yo-Yo copy ability, which is doubly awesome. So hopefully we can able to get ourselves our easy experience, everything else simple and clean and done. So anyways though, let's go ahead and go back up and trying to get back into where we came from, because yeah, you need to fight over for that gust of wind before you're able to actually just to start to realize you'll be blown back. So even then, you just have to like stay super sharp for the most part. So we need to activate the switch before you're able to actually go ahead and just proceed to the actual point. But there's no point for actually going up there, because even then, all he gets is basically just food supplies and that's it. So, but at least it helps if you manage to keep on getting hits most of the time like I do. But anyways, here's the another door puzzle, much like how it does it in the Revenge of Meta Knight. But it forms of how the fact that we need to move extremely fast before you, or after rather, activating all the switches. And if you do that, then you would able to proceed to this next room. Now, there's actually a last copy ability on this level, but it forms of Mecheye. Hop onto this elevator or the lift until you get to the very top of the actual floor, then come to the left until you're able to deal with this particular mini fight. And then if you do like plenty of damage on this particular mini fight, then you get ourselves the plasma. How about that? So naturally, we've only got 2 more copy abilities left before our copy ability collection will be fully completed. But of course, it doesn't stop there until we're able to proceed to actually deal out with Bonkers first. So everything else will be checked out there for the most part though, at least as far as for my circumstances though anyway, because as you can tell, the way of the end of a level works, before the actual fight starts, it always shows up with the actual bigger stars spinning, especially with the stars sparkling in each of the sides of the door. So that's why it usually represents you now fighting a boss, or in this case, finish the level properly. So that makes it pretty obvious with this system, folks. So anyways, so here we go, folks. Here's the next boss in the forms of Milky Way Wishes. And this is actually the returning boss, but in forms of the Revenge of Meta Knight, which is in forms of Heavy Lobster. Which even I know that, this thing will make a comeback, but in forms of the Kirby animate, but in forms of Kirby Fright to the Finish, but in forms of the 100th episode special, aka the Kirby's full feature-length movie. Which even though that makes it represents for the actual English dub. I'm considering the Japanese version of the forms of Kirby, Fright to the Finish did usually become separate parts in the forms of the Japanese version, because it's usually based off from, you know, Kirby right back at ya. But even though one of these bosses, they did feature in that particular, one scene in particular, but in forms of the Hellbird scene. That way that Kirby is about to be doing with Heavy Lobster, and then in order to actually finish him off is by simply just use Ice Kirby, and able to actually let one of Meta Knight's slaves manage to able to use the blast gun before the heavy metal destroys. When when Heavy Lobster, sorry, after the Heavy Lobster managed to able to become freeze throughout. So even then, that makes it a little bit more sensical for those little parts right there. But normally we just defeated him by whatever what copy abilities we're going to be using. So that makes it obvious. So here we go, folks. Here's the 7th level in new forms of Milky Way Wishes. This is the forms of Halfmoon. Means we actually on the actual space. Even then, though, that we can able to be expecting. There's going to be there's actually going to be the final 2 copy abilities we can able to find. But even then, though, hopefully we can find them just in time. So even then, that we can able to find them. So yeah, aside from My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 8 will be on its way in 2 days' time, which I'm really looking forward to, by the way, because I haven't really watched this show for quite some time since the retrospective of the past years. But in forms of Season 1 still, Season 3, and occasional Season 4, and especially noticeable in Season 5 occasionally as well, Season 6, and especially noticeable in Season 7. Or to be more accurately, I really do enjoy for that particular— oh, shoot! I totally forgot about that part. It does contain Bottomless Pits now, so— yep, I died right there, because even then, I could assume if you manage to go down there, I could assume it might actually contains a copy ability down there, which I did accidentally die as I mentioned earlier, but like I just did right for about a few seconds ago. Well, that's okay though, because you're actually restarting where you came from. So even then, luckily though, checkpoints aren't too much noticeable, unlike how it does in your forms of the Great Cave Offensive, in my opinion. Just because of how the fact that you have to restart from where you came from after the save point system. And also the encountering bosses as well, or even just move on to the next section, to the next. So that makes it pretty obvious with that one point or another. So as you can see, we've managed to get ourselves our mirror copy ability now. So we've got one more copy ability left, so that means we have to obtain Ninja. And this is by far the easiest Kirby abilities you can get to find, but in forms of the actual levels themselves. I don't think there's any harder Kirby abilities to get, to be honest, because even then, they're pretty much well hidden from some points or another, but oftentimes I found it's way too easy to actually find them, but still. Anyways though, after actually bypassing those electricity objects right there, because as you can tell, if you manage to accidentally touch them, then, well, even though it's in Flame Kirby at the moment, but until the DS version of that particular Kirby Superstar Ultra, mainly it just gets like an electricity icons here and there, but in this version it just gets like, I'm presuming fire or something like that, maybe. So, aside from those two, releases about to be revealing and doing, one of them is tomorrow by the forms of Detective Pikachu on the 3DS, and especially notable with 2 days time until My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 8 will be on its way in 2 days time, and it's going to be a two-parter, which even then though, that is ever since, you know, Season 6 at the very beginning, because in Season 7, it just gets separate episodes, but released on the exact same day too, but even then though, that's as far as I can go. Oh my god, I'm gonna die again, aren't I? I really get the feeling for this little censored edition right there, but hey, at least we actually got ourselves some more supply of food right there. And, anyway. So the 19th and the final Kirby ability we can actually get is by simply we need to hit the bomb blocks down here, and then there you go, you get yourselves the Ninja Kirby ability. And that's pretty much does it, but in forms of every single Kirby abilities is now being finally added to your, well, shortcuts of the forms of Kirby ability usage. So, before you're able to proceed, I'm actually going to be doing a hammer duos right there, by the forms of Bonkers and Kirby myself. So, that could be very recommendable for my standard viewpoints though, because even then although, fortunately though, there's going to be some more supply of food around here. Thankfully though, this particular site game is actually way generous with you when it comes to getting more food or health and all that stuff, because, and especially with extra lives as well, because even then though, since I've died twice in this mode so far, but it doesn't matter though, because even then though, checkpoints are very generous. Unlike the Great Cave Offensive, mind you. So anyways, here's the next boss in the forms of the not Great Cave Offensive, although it's kind of like how it does in the Great Cave Offensive for a small extent, and more specifically in the forms of Milky Way Wishes. This is the forms of computer virus again, but this time around though is the fact that unlike the first time we actually come across into that particular computer virus, that normally we've already deal the damage of the forms of you know, the slime and the toy puppet, and especially the witch at the end. But this time in this incarnation of the forms of computer virus, although you still have to deal out with the witch first, but now in addition to witch, we also managed to come across into Evil Knight, but in forms of how the fact that he got himself his shield and his little soul blade. And even then though, that it might be a little bit tricky to actually able to deal with him, honestly, because there will be plenty of times where the actual recovery room, but in forms of trying to able to avoid him, is actually way too big. But that doesn't even compare to how they does it by the forms of the third and the final part of this particular fight. And speaking of such, here's the third and final phase of Computer Virus 2. Which, before we actually do this, I'm just gonna able to equip myself Yo-Yo, because that'll be a very good weapon to use. Oh, shoot. Or in this case, a copy ability even. This is the forms of Red Dragon. This is by far the difficult part of Computer Virus, because, first off, he's way too much overpowered by the forms of flamethrowers and all that stuff. And secondly, you can't able to actually avoid him because he's way too big, by the forms of how the fact that his, room recoverage might be a little bit over too big for his size. But still, I can't really deny about this kinds of stuff, but still, it's incredibly awesome looking fight though, still. It's quite unique though. And of course, there will be plenty of times where sometimes I found myself kind of nerve-wracking sometimes, when computer virus can sometimes usually just let these programmers trying to attack you, or other times they're trying to defend themselves, which even then, that might be, seems like a luck conductive right there, but naturally speaking, that's the only nitpick I can have with this particular fight. But even then, still does not look, it still is an incredibly interesting boss fight, but it forms of the actual concept all in all. But it's just the fact that during the likes of the second time we're actually going to be fighting against with computer virus, it just gets really tricky as you progress. So there goes my companion, and there goes the red dragon. So that pretty much does it for not only Halfmoon by the forms of the actual level, but also Computer Virus 2. Because I say Computer Virus 2 because we've already tackled through the first 3 in the forms of the Great Cave Offensive. I think that was actually last time we've actually come across into Computer Virus, I think. So anyways though, here we go, by the forms of the 7th and the final star we can able to get. In fact, for that particular point there, right there, kind of like how it does in the forms of, you know, Kirby's Adventure. If you manage to grab these stars, that actually represents the color of the rainbows, just like how it does in Rainbow Resorts. So, here we go, into the last true level of the game, in this case, the Milky Way Wishes. Ready? I will grant you one wish. You mean like Shinron, the dragon from Dragon Ball Z? Well, I want to control Popstar. Okay, 3, 2, 1, blast off. Wow, it worked! The sun and moon are fighting. Go find Nova. All my plans worked. Popstar is all mine. Now I can do anything. I must be going now. Oh jeez, things can get a really bad thing happening right there. By the looks of it though, it's the fact that the Nova right there is almost getting close to the actual Popstar. So you know what that means, folks? It's time for the true final level in Milky Way Wishes. By all means, it's the fact that we're actually going to be taking control of the actual Kirby with the actual shooting starship. But it informs about the fact that, well, this particular concept feels very similar to how it does it in the airship level, or in this case the plane levels, by the forms of Super Mario Land, for instance, on the Game Boy. Except the fact that it's all in color instead of the usual black and white, unlike in Super Mario Land. And it's almost exactly reminds me of the forms of the Mega Drive title called Zero Wing, and also R-Type by the forms of TurboGrafx 16. Is the fact that in this particular level's gimmick is the fact that the screen is scrolling first off, and plus you do have these different kinds of shooting range you're gonna have to deal with right there. Like, it always shoots through projectiles all in one go, which is a huge plus. But even then, you do need to be very careful though, because there will be plenty of times where we do need to dodge a lot of walls, and especially with enemies themselves. And then if you manage to go all the way from here, then we actually ended up in this next boss by the forms of... I don't know what this boss is actually called though, to be honest, because I could assume this might actually be the heart of a Nova, which even then though, or Nova, because even then though, that actually represents the heart is constantly spinning in the background. And all to do is basically we need to actually destroy as many blasters as possible before, if you manage to get hit quite a few times by projectiles or something like that, or occasional moments like if I managed to, yep, I got crushed. So there's some lot of slowdowns here and there too. But even then, it doesn't do that little game over sequences or anything like that, so it just basically just goes like a crushed moment's notice. But even then though, that it doesn't really matter though, because luckily though, the checkpoints are very generous with you, because you can able to continue when you left off. So anyways, let's try this again, shall we? So even then, this part might be really tricky, especially in the final cannon that you do need to destroy before dealing with the actual main final boss of the game. But even though, it's not too bad though, don't get me wrong. It's just the fact that you need to concentrate on those specific moments where, yeah, you're gonna get hit by that cannon a lot, even for that little laser blaster or something like that. But that's just my only nitpick with this particular fight though sometimes. But apart from that though, it still looks pretty cool though, and I really do love the aesthetics of the actual environment itself, because we're usually taking place inside the actual Nova. And then if you manage to deal with all these little Nova blasters, then basically he's pretty much done for good. And beyond that, we got ourselves the true definition of the true final boss in not only for Milky Way Wishes, but also in the forms of the actual Kirby Superstar, aka Kirby's Fun Pack, for the Super Nintendo / Super Famicom. This is Marx. I can't believe Marx has betrayed us after all this time. So, it was his plan all along to actually just let the sun and moon fight to each other? How dare you, responsible for all that stuff. So anyways, Marx itself, he might be very easy compared to how he does it in the other fights, but in forms of the actual cannons that we do need to deal with. But unfortunately though, that won't be same applies from now on, because as you can see, my health is almost going to be depleted. But again, luckily, just like how it does in new forms of the actual Heart of Nova right there, normally you start to where you came from, so even then though, that could able to actually get ourselves our progressioning somewhat reasonable, and even somewhat, you know, way easier as it should be. So be careful of that, because you don't want to get yourselves frozen onto that. So, oh, darn it, I got killed by the FU laser. And what is up with his face? It looks more likely like, dude. I don't know. I just make things up. Anyway. So anyways, Marx, he's a pretty interesting new boss, final boss, in the forms of the actual Kirby games in the series, because after all, that's it. During the likes of Kirby's Dream Land 1, the final boss is pretty obvious, is King Dedede. Kirby's Adventure got Nightmare, and Kirby's Dream Land 2 got Dark Matter, and now we have Marx, which even then though appears to be more accurately, he's kind of friendly at first, but until when we get to the actual point, until at the Nova for instance, that he now becomes a traitor now, which even then though, that we do need to stop him at all times, just in case if Dreamland will be safe again, because after all, that we do need to save the world after all, as you expect it to. In fact, the entire environment of this particular final boss battle is kind of like similar to how it does it in the forms of Kirby's Adventure, when you're actually able to deal with Nightmare, except the fact that there's no Nightmare throughout, so you have to deal with Marx instead of like, you know, Nightmare. So that makes it pretty obvious with that one point, and as soon as you manage to defeat her for about a few or so times, then the Milky Way Wishes is fully completed, in addition to the entirety of Kirby Superstar, aka Kirby's Fun Pack for the Super Nintendo / Super Famicom. So let's watch the ending of the forms of not only Milky Way Wishes, but also the entirety of Kirby Superstar. The end. So yeah, that particular image right there just tells us how the fact that the Kirby himself is now sleeping, and it turns out he got himself his own house right now, which is kind of cool, because even though this is when before the future games exist by the forms of Kirby's house himself, or even especially noticeable with the forms of the Kirby right back at your animate. So and then after that, then it takes you to the actual proper credit sequence this time, as opposed to how it does in the forms of normally in Spring Breeze, it gets like a very, very quick and short staff credit sequence, and then in Dino Blade, it just takes you to say to be continued, and the Great Cave Offensive tells you how much treasures they've got and how much gold you actually carried along with, and then in Revenge of Meta Knight, it just tells you how much what Kirby abilities, what it looks like for the forms of Kirby himself, in addition to where you obtain the Kirby abilities from the enemies themselves, so that makes it pretty obvious right there. But in Milky Way Wishes, this gets a proper staff credit sequence right there. So even though, that's pretty checks out there. So even though, I'm probably not going to tell you about the overall of my final thoughts of the forms of Kirby Superstar just yet, because it turns out after the staff credits is finished that you'll see why in just a moment, because I should probably mention about this for one last news updates and all that stuff, but it informs of how the fact that recently that LEGO has been just recently announced there's going to be a new LEGO game coming onto the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch, but in forms of LEGO The Incredibles, and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. I think the reason why they're trying to release LEGO, you know, the LEGO The Incredibles video game is just probably because of due to The Incredibles 2 will be on its way on a big screen. So even though that makes it pretty much sense by the looks of how the fact that how that particular game will about to be on the horizon about that. But I don't know exactly when that's going to release though, on the other hand though, because I need to actually just wait and see what happens there. But naturally speaking of such though, it's a pretty well thought out idea. But even then though, this might be actually be, I could classify for saying that this might actually be the first ever Disney LEGO video game we're going to be able to actually just to realize about that. So even then, pretty awesome, and I'm really looking forward to see how this will turn out. So even then, definitely looking forward to that. Shiwata Iwata, that unfortunately he did pass away during the likes of, you know, in 2015, which is kind of sad. Oh! I did not know that Mario was actually in this game. Well, it turns out he's actually in a cameo after all in this staff credit sequence, because after all, he is the main host of the forms of the mascot of Nintendo itself, which even though is pretty popular back in the day, which is still continues strong even to this day. So yeah, after that staff credits has been entirely done and over with by the forms of the, Milky Way Wishes. Well, if you think that this game was actually over yet, well, it turns out there's more, because, after beating the entirety of, the Milky Way Wishes, and especially with all 6 games in one, you get yourselves the 7th and the extra, or in this case, the true definition of the final game that we're actually going to be unlocking through for Kirby Superstar. And then seriously, if I manage to able to actually press any buttons, mainly the A button, this is the arena. Which even then, I'll get into more details onto this kinds of stuff during the next video. So speaking of the next videos, join me next time on Let's Play Kirby Superstar for the Super Nintendo / Super Famicom in Japan, is the fact that we're going to be moving on to the finale of this game's Let's Play, while tackling through the arena and eventually showcase off Megaton Punch and Samurai Kirby for last. So yeah, see you guys next time. Later, fellas.